The war was already lost. That was the quiet truth hanging over the Galactic Coalition chamber as the stars outside burned one by one. Massive holoscreens floated in the air, each showing a different system falling into darkness. Fleets shattered, defense lines erased, entire civilizations reduced to drifting debris. No one spoke anymore. The enemy had no official name. They did not need one. They arrived without warning, without negotiation, and without mercy. Every battle followed the same pattern. The coalition sent ships. The enemy adapted. The coalition lost everything. Triumph, for the enemy, was inevitable. At the center of the chamber, the High Strategist stood frozen, his once bright ceremonial armor scorched and cracked. His species had ruled star lanes for centuries. Now, his voice barely carried. "We have exhausted all options," he said. "Our fleets are at 12% strength. Evacuation corridors are collapsing. There will be no reinforcements." A murmur spread: fear, anger, disbelief. Some delegates argued. Others simply stared at the data. Everyone knew the truth. They were next. In a far corner of the chamber, beneath flickering lights and ignored by most of the council, a junior signal officer stared at an ancient archive window. It had been buried under layers of outdated protocols and forbidden records. Most species had never seen it before. The label faded. The warning symbols were severe. Emergency contact, Deathworld territory status, non-aligned risk level, extreme. The officer hesitated. Humans. The word barely existed in modern records. A species from a violent, unstable planet. A world with crushing gravity, extreme weather, and constant internal conflict. Most analysts believe humans had wiped themselves out centuries ago. Others believed something worse. The officer swallowed and flagged the record for council review. The response was immediate and dismissive. "Absolutely not," one delegate snapped. "Those creatures are myths. If they still exist, they are primitives. They were barely spacefaring when last encountered," another added. "And dangerously unstable." A third laughed, sharp and bitter. "You want to summon legends while the galaxy burns?" The High Strategist closed his eyes. "We are not gambling the last of our hope on a forgotten death world." The archive window dimmed. The chamber returned to despair. But the junior officer did not close the file. Outside the chamber, alarms wailed. Another system had fallen. Civilian ships were cut off mid-escape. The enemy was advancing faster now. Confidence. Certain. The officer's hands trembled over the console. This protocol did not promise salvation. It promised risk. It warned of consequences. It stated clearly, once activated, contact cannot be undone. Still, the message embedded in the code was simple. If extinction is imminent, signal them. The officer looked back at the council. No one was watching anymore. He made his decision. The SOS was sent. It traveled across dead space, through regions no ship dared to enter, past wreckage fields older than most empires. It carried no plea for mercy, only coordinates, threat data, and one final line. "We are losing. If you still exist, we ask for aid." The beacon vanished into the dark. Nothing happened. Minutes passed. Then hours. The council chamber fell silent as the last defensive perimeter collapsed. The enemy fleet's signatures multiplied. They were coming. Some delegates closed their eyes. Others prepared final broadcasts to their homeworlds. The High Strategist stood slowly. "Prepare for." The words died in his throat. A sensor officer gasped. New contacts detected. Everyone turned. The screen zoomed out. Far beyond the battlefield. Far beyond known space. Space itself bent. One jump point became 2. Then 10. Then hundreds. Massive energy spikes flared across the display. Far more than any known fleet could produce. The signatures were unfamiliar. Dense. Heavy. Purpose-built. Not alien. Not coalition. The room erupted into chaos. Enemy reinforcements? No, their tech does not match. Then who? The junior officer whispered, barely audible. They answered. Silence crashed down harder than any explosion. The incoming fleet did not broadcast. They did not scatter. They moved with frightening discipline, forming layered formations that made veteran tacticians uneasy. As the first vessels came into visual range, the council saw them clearly. They were enormous. Scarred hulls bore the marks of countless battles. The armor was thick, brutal, and functional. No decorative lights. No symbols of prestige. Every surface existed for one purpose: war. The enemy fleet adjusted course, confident as ever. They had faced thousands of fleets before. This would be no different. Then the human ships moved. They placed themselves directly between the enemy and the shattered coalition line. No hesitation. No discussion. A defensive wall formed in seconds. For the first time in the entire war, the enemy slowed. A single transmission cut through all channels. Clear. Calm. Humans. This is the Terran Defense Armada. The voice was steady. Not angry. Not afraid. We received your signal. The high strategist felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. The human voice continued. You are not alone anymore. The enemy fleet powered weapons to full charge. The human ships did not retreat. They advanced. The chamber shook as the first shots were fired, and the galaxy held its breath. The first enemy volley tore across space like a wall of fire. Energy beams strong enough to split moons slammed into the front ranks of the human fleet. Coalition observers braced for the familiar outcome. Ships breaking apart, shields failing, lives erased in seconds. But the human ships did not scatter. They absorbed the impact. Hull plating glowed white-hot. Shields flared, collapsed, then reformed in new patterns. Some vessels were hit hard, drifting briefly off alignment, but none broke formation. Inside the council chamber, silence turned to disbelief. That strike erased 3 of our battle groups, a fleet analyst whispered. They're still standing. The enemy did not pause. It never did. A second wave followed, more precise, more lethal. This time the enemy adjusted frequencies, targeting known shield weaknesses that had doomed countless civilizations. Again, the humans endured. But this time, something changed. Human ships began to respond. Not with blind fire. Not with panic. With intent. Dozens of smaller craft launched from the undersides of the larger vessels. They were compact, fast, and aggressive, built not for survival, but for damage. They moved in coordinated swarms, weaving between incoming fire in ways that made coalition pilots gasp. These are not drones, a tactical officer said. Those are crewed fighters. No one replied. The fighters struck the enemy's outer screen, targeting sensor arrays, weapon relays, and command nodes. They did not go for kills. They went for control. For the first time in the war, the enemy's advance stuttered. In the heart of the human formation, aboard a massive flagship marked only by serial numbers and burned scars, the Terran admiral watched the battlefield unfold in silence. He did not raise his voice. He did not celebrate. Confirm enemy adaptation cycle, he said calmly. Confirmed, a human officer replied. They're learning. Slower than expected. The admiral nodded. They always are. The enemy fleet adjusted again, pushing heavier units forward, towering war constructs that dwarfed even the largest coalition ships. Their weapons charged with energy that distorted space itself. The coalition panicked. They're deploying their line breakers. That's the end. Nothing has survived those. The human admiral leaned forward slightly. Hold the line, he said. Human ships tightened formation. Some moved forward, placing themselves directly in front of the enemy's heaviest firepower. Coalition commanders could not understand it. They're exposing themselves. No, another strategist said slowly. They're anchoring. The enemy fired. The impact was catastrophic. Several human ships vanished in blinding flashes. Debris scattered across the battle space. Alarms screamed in the council chamber. Then the data stabilized. The human line was thinner, but it still existed. Worse, while the enemy focused on breaking it, the human fighters slipped past. Deep. They penetrated the enemy formation, striking from inside. Command ships lost contact with their escorts. Firing patterns became erratic. The perfect, unstoppable advance fractured into confusion. What are they doing? A council delegate whispered. A coalition historian answered, voice shaking. They're fighting like predators, not armies. The enemy reacted violently, detonating entire sections of space to clear the infiltrators. Human fighters died by the hundreds. More replaced them. From the human fleet, more bays opened. More pilots launched. No hesitation. No delay. The council chamber realized the truth too late. Humanity had not come with a limited force. They had come prepared to bleed. On the human flagship, casualty numbers scrolled across a secondary display. The admiral did not look away. Redirect surviving squadrons, he ordered. Target enemy logistics clusters. Sir, an officer said, that will strand them. The admiral answered without pause. They know. As if summoned by the words, a final transmission echoed across open channels. It was not addressed to the enemy. It was addressed to the coalition. This is a General Terran broadcast, the admiral said calmly. We are holding the line. Evacuate your civilians. Regroup your fleets behind us. The high strategist felt his limbs go weak. They weren't just fighting. They were buying time. The enemy fleet, now fully engaged, unleashed its most devastating weapons. Entire regions of space collapsed into violent storms of energy. Even the humans struggled to maintain cohesion. Then something unexpected happened. Human ships began to rotate out. Damaged vessels fell back, not to flee, but to be replaced instantly by fresh ones from deeper layers of the formation. It was not a single line. It was a system, layers upon layers of redundancy. The enemy, built for crushing decisive victories, found itself trapped in a grinding war of endurance. And endurance was humanity's home ground. Hours passed. No species had ever survived an engagement with the enemy this long. Coalition sensors showed the impossible, enemy weapon output declining. Heat buildup. Coordination delays. They're tiring, a strategist said in disbelief. The human admiral finally spoke again. Enemy confidence is breaking, he said. Prepare transition. Transition to what, sir? An officer asked. The admiral's eyes hardened. To offense. As if responding to his words, massive human vessels at the rear of the formation powered up systems that had remained silent until now. Their signatures spiked beyond anything previously recorded. The council chamber leaned forward as one. The human fleet began to advance, not in desperation, but in control. The enemy realized the shift instantly. It attempted to pull back. The humans did not allow it. Block retreat vectors, the admiral ordered. Human ships surged forward, sealing exits, cutting off escape routes with brutal precision. The enemy, for the first time in its long history, found itself contained. A coalition officer whispered, voice trembling. They're not just defending us. They're trapping them. The human admiral issued one final command for this phase. All forces, he said calmly, prepare to escalate. In the distance, the largest human ship moved forward alone, its hull blackened, engines burning hot, and a trajectory aimed directly at the heart of the enemy formation. The council chamber watched in stunned silence. That ship was not retreating. It was charging, and every sensor in the galaxy screamed the same warning. Something irreversible was about to happen. The human ship did not slow. It broke formation and surged forward alone, engines burning brighter than anything the coalition had ever seen. It was not the largest vessel in the Armada, but it was heavily armored, its hull scarred by years of combat. Warning lights flashed across its surface as enemy targeting systems locked on. The coalition chamber erupted. They're isolating themselves. That ship is dead. No vessel can survive that much fire. The enemy reacted instantly. It redirected an overwhelming amount of firepower toward the lone human ship. Energy beams intersected, forming a killing field so dense it distorted space itself. The human ship kept going. Its shields failed in layers. Armor peeled away. Entire sections of the hull vaporized. Fires burned openly along its frame. Any other species would have turned back. This one did not. Inside the ship, alarms screamed. Gravity fluctuated. Crew members were thrown against bulkheads. Emergency systems failed one by one. The human captain stood strapped into the command chair, blood running down his brow. His voice was calm. Distance to target? Closing. An officer answered, forcing the words through pain. But we won't make it out. The captain nodded once. We were never meant to. The ship's true purpose revealed itself as it crossed into the center of the enemy formation. Hidden systems activated. Massive containment fields began charging, pulling energy inward instead of projecting it outward. Coalition sensors went wild. What is that ship doing? It's absorbing power. No, that's impossible. The human vessel had become a trap. Enemy fire poured into it, feeding the very system it was charging. The more the enemy attacked, the faster the buildup accelerated. The captain opened a fleet-wide channel. This is the UNS Resolute, he said. Payload armed. You have 90 seconds. Human ships responded instantly, pulling back with perfect coordination. Fighters disengaged, retreating through narrow gaps opened just for them. Coalition fleets scrambled to follow. The enemy did not understand. It pressed harder, convinced the human ship was moments from collapse. It was right, but collapse was the point. Inside the Resolute, crew members gathered in the command deck, bracing themselves. Some recorded messages. Others simply held on to one another. The captain watched the timer tick down. 30 seconds, an officer said quietly. The captain looked at his crew, bruised, exhausted, unafraid. You held the line, he said. History will remember that. The ship reached critical mass. Then it detonated. The explosion was not loud. It was absolute. A sphere of compressed energy expanded outward, swallowing enemy ships whole. Entire war constructs vanished in a blink, erased from existence. Shockwaves tore through the enemy formation, shattering coordination and ripping open massive gaps. Coalition sensors went dark as systems overloaded. When the light faded, a hole existed where the enemy's core had been. The council chamber stood frozen. That ship, it destroyed an entire sector of their fleet. The high strategist whispered a single word. Saviors. But the victory was not free. Human casualty reports spiked across the display. Entire squadrons were gone. The Resolute and its crew were listed as lost with no survivors. For a moment, the human fleet paused. The enemy, reeling but not destroyed, began to reorganize. Its remaining ships regrouped, adapting faster now, learning from the devastation. The coalition feared the worst. Then the human admiral spoke again. Mark their sacrifice, he said quietly. Across the human fleet, status lights shifted. Weapons powered down, not in retreat, but in recognition. For 10 seconds, the battlefield fell silent. The enemy hesitated, confused by the sudden pause. Then the human fleet moved again. This time, with fury. Human ships surged forward in tight formations, weapons firing with ruthless precision. They targeted exposed enemy cores revealed by the explosion. Fighters swarmed damaged vessels, tearing them apart from within. The enemy tried to adapt. It failed. Something fundamental had changed. The humans were no longer testing. They were executing. Coalition commanders watched in awe as human tactics shifted seamlessly, defensive maneuvers turning into aggressive flanking strikes, calculated sacrifices creating openings that were exploited instantly. They're using loss as leverage, a strategist said in disbelief. They're turning death into momentum. The enemy fleet began to break apart, not from damage alone, but from fear. Its movements grew erratic. Retreat vectors formed and collapsed as human ships cut them off. For the first time in the war, enemy vessels attempted to flee. Human forces did not pursue blindly. They corralled. They boxed the enemy in, forcing it toward predetermined zones where heavier human ships waited, weapons charged. On the human flagship, the admiral watched a memorial marker appear on the tactical display, UNS Resolute. He closed his eyes briefly. Then he opened them. Proceed, he said. Massive human cruisers fired in unison, unleashing weapons that collapsed enemy hulls without destroying the surrounding space. Precision, control, ruthlessness without chaos. The coalition fleets followed behind the human line, cautiously re-entering the fight. For the first time, they were not being overwhelmed. They were advancing. Civilian evacuation lanes stabilized. Worlds that had been hours from destruction were suddenly safe. The galaxy felt the shift. News spread faster than light through emergency channels. The enemy can be stopped, and humans are paying the price. In the council chamber, the high strategist straightened his posture. His voice regained strength. All coalition forces, he announced, form behind the human line. We fight together now. Cheers broke out, quiet at first, then unstoppable. But the human admiral did not celebrate. He stared at the enemy remnants, calculating. They are not beaten yet, he said. They are wounded. Dangerous. An officer nodded. They're pulling data from the Resolute event. Adapting again. The admiral's expression hardened. Then we deny them time. Human ships shifted into new attack patterns, moving faster, striking deeper. The enemy was being forced into a corner it had never faced before. Still, something lingered. Long-range sensors detected new enemy signatures forming far beyond the battlefield. Larger, heavier, purpose-built for annihilation. Reinforcements. The coalition panicked again. They have more. They're bringing something worse. The human admiral did not flinch. Good, he said quietly. The officer turned. Sir. The admiral looked at the tactical display, where new human assets began powering up, systems that had not been used since ancient wars. We wanted them to commit everything, he said. Now they have. The human fleet adjusted course, preparing for something far greater than a single battle. And deep within the Armada, dormant systems awakened. Weapons designed not just to win, but to end wars. The enemy reinforcements arrived like a closing fist. New war constructs tore through space, larger than anything the Coalition had ever recorded. Their hulls were layered with adaptive armor. Their weapon cores burned with unstable energy. These were not meant to conquer worlds. They were meant to erase resistance. Coalition sensors screamed warnings across every channel. They're not standard combat units. Those are extinction platforms. Fear returned to the chamber, sharp and immediate. Some delegates cried out. Others collapsed into their seats. They had seen this pattern before. When the enemy deployed these units, entire regions of space went silent forever. Human ships did not retreat. They spread out. Not randomly. Not in panic. In deliberate spacing that confused every Coalition strategist watching. What are they doing? The High Strategist demanded. A tactical analyst stared at the data, horrified. They're thinning their own line. Human ships moved into isolated positions, placing massive distances between each other. Some powered down primary weapons. Others vented heat, exposing vulnerable systems. To the enemy, it looked like weakness. The reinforcements surged forward, targeting the isolated human vessels first. Energy beams lanced out, tearing into lone ships with brutal force. Several human ships vanished in explosions. The Coalition chamber erupted again. They're losing ships too fast. This is suicide. The High Strategist turned toward the junior officer, the one who had sent the SOS. Was this a mistake? He asked quietly. The officer could not answer. On the human flagship, the admiral watched casualty markers appear one by one. His jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. Phase red underway, he said. All isolated units, confirm readiness. One by one, damaged human ships responded. Not with fear. With resolve. Unit ready. Standing by. Proceed. The enemy closed in, confident now. Its reinforcement fleet concentrated fire, overwhelming the lone human ships one at a time. Then the humans triggered it. Each isolated ship activated a system buried deep within its core. Coalition sensors struggled to interpret the readings as space itself began to warp around the vessels. What is happening? A strategist whispered. The answer came too late. The first human ship collapsed inward, then detonated, not outward, but sideways. A controlled spatial rupture tore open, dragging nearby enemy vessels into a violent gravitational shear. Enemy ships were crushed, twisted, and shredded as space folded against itself. The rupture closed. Silence. Then it happened again. Another isolated human ship triggered its payload. Another controlled collapse. Another cluster of enemy reinforcements vanished. The Coalition chamber stared in horror and awe. They're using their ships as weapons. No, the historian corrected, voice breaking. They're using themselves. Human vessels continued to fall, but every loss took entire enemy formations with it. The reinforcements that had once meant certain doom were being carved apart piece by piece. The enemy adapted, spreading out, attempting to maintain distance. The humans anticipated this. Remaining ships surged inward, forcing the enemy back into tighter formations with aggressive, relentless pressure. Human fighters harassed from every angle, hurting the enemy exactly where the humans wanted them. This was planned, the High Strategist realized. All of it. The human admiral spoke softly, almost to himself. This is the doctrine, he said, written when our world was still burning. A human officer looked at him. Casualties are extreme, sir. I know. Permission to abort phase red? The admiral shook his head. Denied. Across the battlefield, a human cruiser took devastating fire, its engines failing, hull splitting open. The ship drifted, dead in space. Enemy vessels closed in, eager for an easy kill. The cruiser's captain opened a broadcast channel, not to the enemy, but to the human fleet. This is UNS Valor, she said calmly. Systems failing. Payload intact. The admiral closed his eyes. Valor, he said quietly. You are cleared. The captain smiled faintly. Tell them, she said. We held. The ship detonated. The explosion ripped through the heart of the enemy reinforcement wing. When the light faded, nothing remained but debris and broken energy trails. Coalition officers began to cry openly. They're dying on purpose. The junior officer whispered, voice shaking. They're choosing it. The high strategist clenched his fists. No, he said. They're paying a price we never would. The enemy fleet faltered. Its reinforcements, meant to end the war, were being annihilated at unacceptable cost. Its calculations no longer led to victory. For the first time, enemy command nodes began issuing retreat directives. Human ships surged forward immediately, denying escape. They did not chase recklessly. They applied pressure, guiding the enemy's movement like hunters driving prey. The human admiral straightened. Phase red complete, he said. Prepare phase black. A hush fell across every channel. Coalition analysts stared at the human tactical files streaming in. Phase black. Was that ever used before? A human liaison answered quietly. Once. When the liaison looked away. When humanity almost didn't survive. Human ships that had remained silent until now powered up systems so massive they bent sensor readings. Entire vessels reconfigured, hulls shifting, weapon arrays unfolding like steel wings. The enemy felt it. It attempted to disengage fully, burning energy reserves in a desperate retreat. Human forces closed the net. The battlefield changed again, not from chaos, but from inevitability. Coalition fleets followed behind, emboldened now, striking exposed enemy units with renewed strength. Worlds once marked for destruction blinked back to green. Civilian evacuation signals stabilized. Hope returned, not as a fragile thing, but as something sharp. The human admiral watched the enemy formations compress under pressure. He felt the weight of every ship lost, every life spent. This ends soon, he said. One way or another. An officer turned toward him. Sir, enemy command is broadcasting. The admiral nodded. Put it through. Static filled the channel. Then a harsh, alien voice broke through, strained, unfamiliar with fear. You cannot sustain this, it said. Your losses are unacceptable. The admiral leaned forward. They are acceptable, he replied calmly. Silence followed. The enemy did not understand. The human admiral continued. We are a death-world species, he said. We were shaped by extinction-level threats before we ever reached the stars. His voice hardened. If this war continues, we will endure longer than you. The transmission cut. The enemy began pulling back its remaining forces, abandoning entire sectors to escape the killing ground. Human ships did not pursue. Not yet. The admiral issued his next command. Hold positions. Let them run. An officer hesitated. Sir. The admiral's eyes were cold. They need to spread the message. The coalition chamber fell silent as the truth settled in. This war was no longer about survival. It was about consequence. And humanity had just shown the galaxy what it was willing to give and what it would take. Phase Black did not begin with an explosion. It began with silence. Across the battlefield, human ships went dark. Weapon emissions dropped. Fighter launches ceased. Even engine flares dimmed to barely visible levels. To the coalition, it looked like exhaustion. To the enemy, it looked like an opportunity. Enemy commanders reassembled what remained of their forces. Damaged units were pulled back. Fresh formations took shape. Their calculations adjusted again, faster now, sharpened by loss. They believed they finally understood humanity. They were wrong. Deep inside the human fleet, systems older than most spacefaring civilizations came online. They were not designed for speed or spectacle. They were designed for certainty. On the human flagship, the admiral stood alone, hands clasped behind his back, watching the battlefield as if it were already finished. Phase Black authorization confirmed. An officer said quietly. All nodes synced. Begin, the admiral replied. Nothing happened. At least, nothing visible. Then coalition sensors began reporting anomalies. Small ones at first. A fluctuation in local gravity. A distortion in timestamps. Navigation beacons drift off position by fractions of a degree. Is that interference? A strategist asked. No, a scientist answered slowly. It's alignment. Across the battlefield, space itself began to change. Human ships repositioned with surgical precision, moving into exact coordinates that made no tactical sense to the coalition. They formed patterns too large to be formations and too exact to be coincidence. The enemy advanced cautiously, probing the quiet human line. Still no response. Enemy weapons fired. Energy lanced toward human ships and vanished. The beams did not deflect. They did not miss. They ceased to exist. What just happened? An enemy command node broadcast in confusion. Coalition sensors finally understood. The humans were not blocking fire. They were removing space. Localized regions of reality were being folded, compressed, and erased for fractions of a second, just long enough to swallow incoming attacks. This is impossible, a coalition physicist whispered. That kind of control requires planetary-scale infrastructure. The human liaison answered calmly. We carry our infrastructure with us. Enemy commanders panicked. They ordered full assault, flooding the region with overwhelming firepower. It made no difference. Every attack vanished into nothing. Then the humans responded, not with a barrage, with a single pulse. It rippled outward like a heartbeat, invisible but devastating. Enemy ships caught within it shuddered as internal systems failed simultaneously. Power cores destabilized. Command links collapsed. Entire vessels drifted, dead, without a shot fired. They're not destroying them, the high strategist said, stunned. They're turning them off. The enemy tried to retreat. They couldn't. Phase Black had already sealed the battlefield. Human ships had positioned themselves along critical gravitational corridors, locking movement paths in ways only a species raised under constant physical stress could calculate. Every escape vector collapsed into a controlled dead zone. The enemy was trapped. On the human flagship, casualty lists stopped scrolling. For the first time since the war began, human losses stabilized. The admiral exhaled slowly. Proceed to containment, he ordered. Human ships advanced, not aggressively, but inevitably. Enemy vessels drifted helplessly, stripped of power and coordination. Fighters docked with disabled ships, boarding not to kill, but to seize data. Coalition commanders watched, confused. They're not finishing them. The human liaison nodded. Not yet. Data streamed into human systems at terrifying speed. Every enemy mistake, every adaptation, every failure was absorbed, analyzed, and solved. Within minutes, human tacticians understood the enemy better than the enemy understood itself. The admiral studied the results. Broadcast channel, he said. A wideband transmission opened across the battlefield, reaching every enemy unit, every surviving command node. This is the Terran Defense Armada, the admiral said, his voice steady and clear. Phase Black is complete. The enemy did not respond. The admiral continued. You believed triumph was inevitable. You believed resistance was temporary. You believed loss would break us. He paused. You were wrong. Across the battlefield, human ships powered weapons. Not randomly, not emotionally, but with cold precision. The admiral raised a hand. Target enemy command echelon only, he said. Leave the rest intact. The coalition chamber leaned forward as one. Human weapons fired. Not beams. Not missiles. Causality disruptions. Enemy command ships vanished. Not exploded, not shattered, but erased as if they had never existed. Their absence sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet, not physical, but psychological. Every remaining enemy vessel froze. They had no orders, no coordination, no future plans. The enemy broadcast finally came through, raw and shaken. Cease, the voice demanded. We request terms. The coalition chamber erupted. They're surrendering. This is it. The human admiral did not respond immediately. He watched the battlefield, the drifting enemy ships, the silence where command once existed. Then he spoke. Terms will be delivered, he said, after consequences. Enemy panic spiked. What consequences? The voice demanded. The admiral's tone did not change. The ones you taught the galaxy. Human ships shifted formation again. This time, they moved away from the enemy, toward the stars behind them. Coalition systems. Occupied systems. Worlds burned earlier in the war. What are they doing? A delegate asked. The high strategist understood first. They're not punishing the enemy fleet, he whispered. They're undoing the war. Across dozens of systems, human task groups emerged from jump points near shattered worlds. They deployed reconstruction platforms, stabilization arrays, and emergency shields. Planetary atmospheres were repaired. Radiation storms dissipated. Orbital debris fields were cleared. Entire systems were stabilized in hours, work that would have taken the Coalition centuries. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. Humanity was not just ending the war. It was reversing it. The enemy listened, helpless, as reports flooded in. Systems they had burned were returning to life. Populations they had erased were being rescued from bunkers and deep shelters. Their terror spread faster than any weapon. "You cannot do this," the enemy broadcast again. This is dominance." The admiral replied calmly. "No," he said. "This is my responsibility." He paused. "Dominance is what comes next if you try again." The enemy fell silent. Coalition commanders realized something profound. Humanity was not fighting for power. They were setting a rule. Phase Black ended as quietly as it began. Human ships powered down the reality warping systems. Space returned to normal. The battlefield remained littered with disabled enemy vessels, alive, intact, and surrounded. The admiral turned to his officers. "Prepare for the final phase," he said. An officer hesitated. "Sir, there may be nothing left to do." The admiral's eyes hardened. "There is always something left." Far beyond the battlefield, deep in enemy territory, ancient alarms began to ring. Systems long considered untouchable detected something new. Human presence. Not fleets. Not weapons. Observers. The galaxy did not yet understand what that meant. But it would. Soon. The battlefield no longer burned. It waited. Disabled enemy ships drifted in silence, surrounded by human vessels that held position without aggression. No weapons fired. No warnings issued. The enemy, once unstoppable, now floated helpless, unsure if annihilation or mercy would follow. Coalition commanders did not know what to do with the quiet. "They could end it now," one delegate whispered. "Why haven't they?" The human liaison answered softly. "Because ending it was never the goal." On the human flagship, the admiral studied a new set of data. Not enemy positions. Not weapon ranges. Civilian survival probabilities. Entire worlds that had survived only because the human fleet had arrived when it did. Refugee convoys drifting in deep space. Cities buried underground to escape orbital fire. "This is what matters," the admiral said quietly. He issued a command that stunned every coalition channel. "All medical, engineering, and relief vessels, deploy." Human ships broke formation, not to pursue the enemy, but to move past them. They entered shattered systems, docking with damaged stations, stabilizing failing habitats, restoring power grids. Coalition sensors struggled to process it. "They're helping," a strategist said in disbelief. Human medical ships boarded coalition vessels that were still bleeding from earlier battles. Human medics treated alien wounded without hesitation, adapting tools and methods on the fly. Species that had never seen a human face now stared into calm eyes behind visors. Hearing steady voices offer reassurance in broken translations. "You're safe," the humans said. "We've got you." The enemy listened. They intercepted every signal, every active aid. Confusion spread through their remaining command nodes. "This makes no sense," an enemy analyst broadcast. "They should be consolidating power." The enemy leadership opened a private channel, one they had never used before. Negotiation. The signal reached the human flagship. The admiral accepted it. The enemy representative appeared as a fractured hologram, its form unfamiliar, its voice strained. "You have one," it said. "Declare your terms." The admiral did not respond immediately. He let the silence stretch. Finally, he spoke. "We are not here to rule you." The enemy reacted sharply. "Then why do you continue operations?" The admiral gestured toward the stars. "Because your war is not finished yet," he said. "Its damage is still killing people." The enemy struggled to understand. "You are expending resources to save those you do not control." "Yes." "Why?" The admiral's answer was simple. "Because we can." Across the galaxy, human relief operations continued. Entire planetary shields were reactivated. Atmospheres were seeded with stabilizing agents. Human engineers worked beside alien crews, sharing technology freely. Coalition worlds began broadcasting messages of gratitude. Some wept openly. Others knelt before human ships as they passed. The humans did not acknowledge it. They kept working. The enemy command nodes watched the data with growing unease. "This will make them indispensable," one warned. The galaxy will follow them. Another replied quietly. They already are. At last, the enemy spoke again. What do you want from us? The admiral met the hologram's gaze. 3 things. The enemy leaned forward. State them. First, the admiral said, you will withdraw from all occupied systems. Immediately, the enemy nodded. Agreed. Second, the admiral continued. You will dismantle every extinction platform you possess. Under our supervision. The enemy hesitated. That would leave us vulnerable. The admiral's voice hardened. You already are. Silence. Finally, the enemy said, agreed. The admiral nodded once. Third, he said, you will remember. The enemy did not understand. Remember what? The admiral leaned closer. That we answered when the galaxy cried out. That we bled to stop you. And that if you ever rise again. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. The enemy lowered its gaze. We will remember. The channel closed. Coalition chambers erupted into stunned conversation. No one had expected this. No territory seized. No tribute demanded. No throne claimed. They could have ruled us all, a delegate whispered. The high strategist answered quietly. That is why they never will. Human fleets remained for weeks, ensuring stability. Refugee populations returned to rebuilt cities. Children saw sunlight for the first time in months. Human soldiers stood watch without ceremony. They did not celebrate victory. They mourned their dead. Memorial markers appeared across human ships. Names, call signs, ships lost. Simple, unadorned. Coalition observers noticed something else. Human crews gathered in silence at specific times. They stood together, heads bowed, honoring those who did not return. No speeches, no songs, just memory. The enemy followed through on its withdrawal. Extinction platforms were dismantled under human supervision. Entire war factories were shut down, their cores rendered inert. As the enemy retreated deeper into its own territory, something strange happened. Human ships did not follow. They watched. Observers. The human admiral addressed the coalition one final time. The war is over, he said. But peace is not automatic. He paused. You will rebuild, he continued. You will protect each other. And you will not forget who stood between you and extinction. The high strategist bowed his head. We will not, he said. The human fleet began to withdraw. One by one, massive ships turned away from coalition space, engines igniting as they prepared to return to the dark regions they had come from. The junior officer, the one who had sent the SOS, watched the fleet depart, tears in his eyes. They came, he whispered. They really came. The high strategist placed a hand on his shoulder. And they will come again, he said, if we ever deserve it. Deep in space, aboard the human flagship, the admiral stood at the viewport. Stars stretched ahead, endless and quiet. An officer approached. Sir, she said, long-range sensors detect no pursuit. No hostile activity. The admiral nodded. Good. She hesitated. What happens now? The admiral thought for a long moment. Now, he said, we make sure the galaxy never needs to send that signal again. The human fleet vanished into jump space, leaving behind stabilized systems, rebuilt worlds, and a galaxy forever changed. But far away, beyond known space, something watched. Something ancient. It had seen the war. It had seen humanity's power and their mercy. And it had begun to calculate. Because in a universe shaped by predators, the most dangerous thing was not a species that was conquered. It was one that chose restraint. The war ended quietly. There was no final explosion. No victory parade across the stars. No declaration carved into history by force. Instead, there was absence. The human fleet was gone. Coalition space felt strangely empty without it. Defense lines still held. Worlds still lived. But the shield that had stood between extinction and survival had stepped away. And the galaxy did not know how to breathe without it. In the weeks that followed, emergency councils turned into permanent assemblies. Delegates arrived not in panic, but in urgency. Every species understood the same truth. Nothing would ever be the same. The high strategist stood once more at the center of the chamber. His armor had been repaired, polished, but he did not wear it with pride. He wore it with humility. Humanity has declined all offers, he announced. The chamber erupted. They refused reparations. They rejected permanent seats. They don't want command authority. The high strategist raised a hand for silence. They refused everything. A hush fell. Coalition leaders struggled to understand it. Empires had risen for less. Wars had been fought for a fraction of the power humanity had just proven it could claim. They saved us, one delegate said. Why would they walk away? A historian answered softly. Because they came to stop a war, not to start a new order. Across the galaxy, the political shockwaves spread faster than any fleet. Old hierarchies cracked. Dominant powers found their authority questioned. Minor civilizations, those once ignored, now spoke with confidence. Because they had seen something stronger than the Empire. They had seen restraint. On dozens of worlds, public broadcasts replayed the same moments again and again. Human ships taking the line. The sacrifice of the resolute. Phase Black unfolding without cruelty. Relief ships arriving instead of conquerors. Children watched in silence. The elders wept. And soldiers, veterans who had survived hopeless wars, stood and saluted empty skies. Religions struggled to interpret what they had seen. Some called humans angels of war. Others called them harbingers of judgment. Most settled on something simpler. Guardians. But humanity made no effort to shape the narrative. They issued no follow-up message. No warning. No promise. They simply vanished back into the dark. That silence unsettled everyone. In enemy territory, the withdrawal was complete. The dismantling of extinction platforms was verified. Factories stood cold. Fleets remained docked, inactive. The enemy leadership convened in secrecy. This changes everything, one of them said. They could have destroyed us. They still can, another replied. Fear hung heavy over them, not of annihilation, but of being watched. Because they were. Human observer units remained at the edge of enemy space. They did not interfere. They did not communicate. They recorded every movement, every decision. The enemy learned a new kind of fear, the fear of consequence without provocation. Back in coalition space, reconstruction accelerated. Shared technology flowed freely, inspired by human examples. Defense agreements were rewritten. Borders softened. The galaxy, for the first time, began to act like a single community. Not because it was forced to, because it remembered how close it had come to extinction. The junior officer, the one who had sent the SOS, was promoted. Offer a place of honor. He declined most ceremonies, choosing instead to oversee the archive where the Deathworlder protocol had been hidden. He restored it carefully, not as a last resort. As a reminder, the high strategist visited him one cycle later. Do you think they're watching us? The strategist asked. The officer did not look up from his console. Yes, he said. I hope so. Far beyond coalition space, the human fleet moved through regions marked on no public map. Their ships bore scars of the war. Their numbers were fewer now, but their resolve was unchanged. On the flagship, the admiral reviewed reports from across known space. Reconstruction progress. Enemy compliance. Observer data. Stability is increasing, an officer said. No hostile indicators. The admiral nodded. And politically? Unstable, the officer admitted. But trending cooperative. The admiral allowed himself a small breath. That will do. Another officer hesitated. Sir, there are calls for you. From the coalition. They want guidance. The admiral turned away from the console. They don't need guidance, he said. They need space to grow. Even if they fail. The admiral's voice was quiet. Especially then. The officer nodded. A moment passed. Sir, she said. Permission to ask a personal question? Granted. Why did we refuse power? She asked. After everything we lost, everything we proved? The admiral looked at the stars. Because power taken never rests, he said. And power accepted becomes expectation. He paused. We didn't answer the SOS to become the center of the galaxy, he continued. We answered so the galaxy wouldn't need a center at all. The fleet continued onward. Elsewhere, far deeper than human space. Ancient observers finished their calculations. They had watched civilizations rise and fall for eons. They had cataloged conquerors, exterminators, and tyrants. Humanity did not fit any category. They are not predictable, one observer noted. Another replied, they are dangerous. Yes, the first agreed. But not because of their weapons. Because of their choice. Back in coalition space, the Galactic Council voted unanimously on a new amendment to its emergency charter. The language was simple. In case of existential threat, the following protocol is authorized. Step 1, unite. Step 2, End internal conflict. Step 3. If all hope is lost, signal the Deathworlders. The document was sealed, not as a weapon, as a prayer. The High Strategist signed last. His hand shook. We survived, he said quietly. Because they cared. Above a rebuilt world, children watched the night sky. No human ships passed overhead. No fleets moved. But the stars felt different now. Safer. And somewhere in the dark, humanity watched. Not as rulers, not as gods, but as a line that would be held again. If it ever had to be. Years passed. Not in peace exactly, but in something new. The galaxy learned how to live without constant fear. Trade lanes reopened where battlefields once burned. Worlds that had been written off as dead slowly returned to life. Atmospheres stabilized. Oceans thawed. Cities were rebuilt stone by stone, habitat ring by habitat ring. History recorded the war as a turning point. But history struggled to name what humanity had become. They were not conquerors. They were not saviors who demanded worship. They were not rulers of an empire. They were something harder to define. Across coalition space, new generations grew up hearing the same stories. Not legends filled with exaggeration, but recordings. Data. Cold facts that somehow felt heavier than myth. Children learned how the war was lost, until it wasn't. Cadets studied human tactics with equal parts respect and fear. Leaders learned a single lesson above all others. Never force humanity to choose between mercy and survival. Because once that choice was made, there was no undoing it. The emergency protocol remained sealed in the deepest archive layer. It had not been used again. It was not meant to be. Its presence alone was enough. The junior officer, now older, now tired, still oversaw that archive. His hair had begun to gray. His hands shook slightly when he accessed the file. He opened it once a year. Not to prepare. To remember. The warning text had been updated. Deathworlders, Terran species status, non-aligned capability, unclassified recommendation, never provoke. Below it, a new line had been added by unanimous vote. Note, they answered when no one else did. On a distant world rebuilt from ash, a memorial stood beneath an open sky. It did not depict heroes in triumph. It showed silhouettes, simple, unmarked figures standing in a line. The inscription was brief. They did not conquer. They did not stay. They stood. Visitors from dozens of species come every year. Some left offerings. Others left nothing at all, only silence. And that silence carried weight. In enemy territory, change came slowly. Former warlords were removed. Command structures were dismantled. Fear-driven doctrine gave way to caution. Not out of kindness, but understanding. They had seen what lay beyond escalation. They had seen humanity choose restraint when annihilation was easier. That knowledge haunted them more than defeat ever could. Deep within human space, far beyond coalition maps, the Terran fleet continued its patrols. Fewer ships now. Fewer crews. But not weaker. Training simulations replayed the war endlessly. Not to glorify it, but to refine the line that must never break. On the flagship, the Admiral stood at a viewport once more. His posture was slower now. The weight of command had not lifted. An officer approached quietly. Sir, she said, long-range observation confirms stability across coalition space. No escalation indicators. The Admiral nodded. And the observers? He asked. They're still watching us, she said. The Admiral allowed himself a faint smile. Good, he replied. Then they'll know when not to interfere. She hesitated. Do you think the galaxy truly understands us now? The Admiral considered the question for a long moment. No, he said, but they understand the cost of misunderstanding us. The fleet drifted onward. Humanity did not expand. It did not claim new systems. It did not spread ideology or banners. It was refined. It was prepared. Because humanity remembered something the galaxy often forgot. Peace was not permanent. Far beyond known space, the ancient observers completed their final report. Their conclusion was unprecedented. Assessment: humanity represents a stabilizing anomaly. Their capacity for destruction is extreme. Their capacity for restraint is greater. Recommendation: avoid direct conflict. Avoid indirect manipulation. Observe only. The report was archived and sealed, never to be reopened lightly. Back in coalition space, a crisis unfolded. Not a war, but a collapse. A massive star began to destabilize near a populated system. Evacuation would take years. No fleet could move fast enough. The council convened in panic. Debate erupted. Options failed one by one. Then someone spoke the words no one had said in years. Do we send the signal? The chamber went silent. The high strategist, older now, slower, looked around the room. This is not a war, he said. This is not extinction. No, another replied. But it will kill millions. The strategist closed his eyes. Then we must decide carefully, he said. They did not send the signal. Instead, coalition fleets worked together. Sacrifices were made. Losses were endured. The system was saved. It was harder, slower, painful, but it was theirs. And somewhere far away, human observers noted the outcome. The admiral reviewed the report and nodded once. They learned, he said quietly. Time continued. Stories became lessons. Lessons became culture. The phrase Deathworlder lost its edge. It no longer meant danger alone. It meant resolve. It meant endurance. It meant that somewhere in the dark, a species existed that had survived everything the universe could throw at it, and chose not to become the worst thing in it. On a quiet cycle, the junior officer, now retired, stood alone in the archive for the last time. He looked at the sealed protocol. He placed a hand on the console. Thank you, he whispered. Not as a plea, as gratitude. Far across the stars, a faint sensor rippled past through Terran space. Nothing threatening, nothing urgent. The admiral glanced at it and dismissed it. Humanity did not jump into the shadows, but it did not sleep either. Because if the galaxy ever faced the edge again, if extinction returned with certainty, the signal would still work, and humanity would still answer. Not for glory, not for power, but because someone, somewhere, would need a line held. And humanity had proven, once and forever, that when all hope was gone, the Deathworlders did not ask why. They simply came.